You're listening to E-Talk Radio. This is Mother Wit. I am your host, Mia Imani, and for the next hour, my co-host, Akitha Calloway, and I will be speaking with two authors about the effects of physical discipline on children in the Black community. Specifically, the topic is beating Black kids. Akitha and I are joined today by Terrace McMahon Grimes and Asada Kirkland. Terrace is the author of the Teresa Galloway Mystery Series and her most recent novel, Smelling Herself, which is available now in paperback.
And Asada Kirkland is the author of Beating Black Kids. She hosts speaking engagements and an anti-corporal punishment training program based on her book, Beating Black Kids. This book is about not having to hit children to rear them. These workshops help adults find better ways to rear children without using violence.
Ladies, welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. This is Asada.
And this is Terrace. It's my pleasure as well.
Ladies,
This is
go ahead, Akitha.
No, I'm just really excited about this topic, and thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, it's a very important topic. I'd like to start our program with a little background on how we came to be here with both of our guests today discussing this topic. The issue of beating Black kids is an issue of paramount importance, and it is definitely not without controversy. I've long been a fan of Terrace's novels. I reached out to her on social media. She's a very approachable, down-to-earth type of author and person. As our friendship developed, she introduced me to the book that Asada wrote by sharing stories of carrying it with her to share with mothers and other child caregivers who seem to be frustrated and in need of a dose of the wisdom the book has to offer. I was fascinated by this. That's such a community effort and community outreach. People talk about it takes a village to raise a child, but I think that's kind of the phrase has become minimized by taking away the roots. It is an African proverb. It takes a village indeed to raise a child. Terrace, would you mind sharing with us how you discovered the book, what it means to you personally, and the way you have approached child rearing?
Well, as you know, the subject, I'm very passionate about the subject. And I usually have an origin story to tell you about each book I've read, but I can't remember how I discovered it. It might have been I was doing research for a project that I'm always working on, some project. But I like to think that the book found me. And it has, since I discovered it, it has been almost like my Bible when I talk about the subject. And the book is absolutely perfect for that. It's easy to understand, it's engaging, and it's a good conversation starter, and almost like a facilitator, having a facilitator right there with you. As you know, my latest book, Smelling Herself, has a very horrific whooping scene at the early part of it, the beginning. And at book signings, I use Beating Black Kids to bring attention to it and also discuss it and get people to see, it's not just part of the book, it's saying something about our culture. And it's also saying something about a mother's fears. And that's one of the reasons I've discovered that people beat their kids because they're afraid.
Okay.
My mother had a saying, she'd say, I'd rather kill you than have somebody else do it.
Oh, my.
And that's heavy. In fact, that's the title of my memoir that I'm also working on. I'd rather kill you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow. So, Asada, I have only recently been introduced to your work through helping Mia prepare for this show. I watched several past interviews and noticed a familiar theme. You say that Black parents are beating their children because it has been passed down to us as a means of discipline through colonization. Could you elaborate on this for our listeners?
Sure, but first I want to say, y'all got me sitting here going, are they talking about me? Are they talking about my book? I can't. I just so honored. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've contributed to the world. But anyway, so yeah, this whole debacle of hitting ourselves, and even the psychosis connected to "I'd rather kill you." I call it the beloved syndrome. Like
Hmm.
Oprah, when Oprah
Mhm.
saw the slave master coming, she
Right.
went and got the infants, ran to the shed, and slit their throats
Mm,
instead of him taking them.
mm,
That's a psychosis that we have, that, I gotta beat him before the cops beat him, and but it's not workable. It doesn't make them better. It doesn't make children better. And so we can sit here all day and definitely talk about how this comes from slavery. This, not the hitting per se, because it's done in other cultures, but we're probably the only people who rationalize and justify the beating of our offspring and see it as something better than anything else. This is what you're supposed to do. That comes from slavery. That comes from being told, oh, you're going against the Bible. Oh, even in the Bible, they tell you got to be hit and blah, 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 blah. And so we have to, sit down, take a moment's pause, and think about what we really want and not what we've been passed down, because a lot of our ancestors just didn't know better after slavery, in terms of what to do better to rear us. The word discipline comes from the Latin root disciplina, and disciplina in Latin means to teach. It doesn't
Right.
mean to hit. So
mm.
we need to look at teaching something, not teaching a lesson, or you got to discipline them. We have a misunderstood on that word. So basically, the reason in my book, Beating Black Kids, I don't really talk about slavery a lot, because we're not going to scapegoat our behavior onto a thing, onto a system, we're going to take responsibility for what we are perpetuating and go ahead and stop hitting our children because we find a better way to do it, to discipline them.
Okay.
I I understand that. But in talking about colonization, I also wanted to follow up with the question, and you bring up that we can't blame our system for what we do to our children, but I also wanted to look at other parts of it. So, do you think that systems of patriarchy combined with colonization are also a factor? And I say this because many of other cultures also believe in sometimes harsh physical discipline to their children. But the
Mhm,
common thread with all of it is that they are mostly patriarchal and some point in history have been victims of colonization.
mhm.
And it's just not to, take away from what we're doing, but I'm just curious on that part of the discussion right now.
Sure. I mean, for me, I like to be very simplistic about how we're going to handle this.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost never deal with where it comes from, because okay, if it did come from that, a patriarchal society, it came from whatever, okay, got it. But what's happening right now and what do we need to fix? I don't really get deep, me personally, into that, because it allows people to stop being responsible for their own actions and say, well, he started it. It's almost like
Right.
that. He started it. I don't care if he
Understood.
started it. You trying to fit, you still doing it. So no, I don't really, even slavery overall and being colonized overall, there are so many atrocities that have come from that. But we have to make the decision if we are going to continue debilitative behavior. Are we going to continue uh, doing our grandmama beat us? Are we going to continue beating? Are we going to? No, we
Mm-hmm.
have to take a minute and look at where are we going. And let's be real about it. When it comes to black folks, it's not just poor blacks that hit their children. It's like it goes all across socioeconomic boundaries.
That's true.
Right.
We are going to hit our children, and this is just what we do. And that is not anything to brag about, because we're not getting good products. We're getting products, our children, we're getting what we don't want, and that is defiance, anger, misguidance, low self-worth. That beating them, that's what that creates when you do that to a person, when you subjugate a person. So I get more into present time, let's handle the problem, than I do kind of analyzing or looking at, where did this come from on a colonial level, on a slavery level, who started it. All I look at when you come to the past is what do images of our parents look like For real, African. Go to African art. You see babies on their mother's lap, suckling breasts. You see them tied to their mother's back. Egyptian, you see the baby standing, the young child standing next to the pharaoh. Like all of these images of sane parenting you see in our ancient art. That shows you how we used to think. All of this other stuff is new made from a new experience, and we just need to shift the paradigm back to how we used to revere our children.
Keith, I kind of want to interject right there. I agree with you,
Okay.
Asada. While I was researching the origins myself, I came upon an online article written by Andre Van Wyck and Jerry Chifamba. It's in the Premium Times that said in part, South Africa's constitutional court recently upheld a high court ruling that corporal punishment at home is unconstitutional. Many parents, this is in South Africa, were protested that, hey, we were raised that way. It's African culture after all. But is it an African tradition, the article goes on to say, to spank or beat children? And does it reproduce responsible adults? No, says the data. Physical discipline is not rooted in African culture, but in colonialism. Studies show that hitting children contributes to domestic and community violence and can even reduce children's intellectual capacity. The problem is global, and its harmful effects are multi-generational. To me, that seems to confirm what Asada has been saying too.
Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that because, you find we do have to research our own sanity.
Mm-hmm.
When were we sane according to ourselves in our own world with our own actuality? I won't say reality, I'll say actuality. And so that takes some research to put things back in motion. There's a saying about the reverence of children. I don't have the excerpt in front of me, but it's from Kenya. And there's an author here in Chicago named Usini Perkins. He's a playwright, a poet, but he just did a whole new sort of literary piece on this concept of revering our children that is expressed in Kenyan culture. So it'll be good for us to collect this data so we can really see how we really used to deal with our children and what we use to rear our children. And if you want respect from children, you have to garner it. Like you have to be respectful. We respect Martin Luther King because what he did, not because he was older. So we need to sort of rehabilitate our own selves and how civilized we are. I always say Black Lives Matter. No, Black lives need to matter to Black people. Everybody else, whatever, but they're not going to matter to them if they don't matter to us first. And when you're beating your offspring, you're showing that life does not matter to you the way you say it does. You have to do things to make the being feel like they matter, not just saying it out your mouth. Do they feel like they matter? And in a lot of our cultures, Black cultures around the world, African diasporic cultures, our children definitely don't feel like they matter to the people that mean the most, and that's their parents.
Terrace?
Yes. I agree with Asada. I approach it a little differently because I use the creative process and it's the subtlety of it, but sometimes the outright just statement of it I believe slavery is one of the aspects that we have to consider. And my understanding of West African cultures is that children were considered as the receptacle of the ancestors, and they were, to some extent, not quite worshipped as we would see it today, but they were a special entity, and to beat them was outrageous. So I like to focus on mother-child relationship, not so much on the father, because I think it's the mothers who set the tone for family discipline, and that's how I deal with it.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I want to pivot back to the article I read and add this. They also said that spanking is a colonial import. Okay, so we're talking diasporic. So we're talking the Americas, the islands, the continent. Okay, so the beating of children was brought to this continent, the article says, through missionaries and missionary schools, said Sonia Vojito of the global initiative to end all corporal punishment of children, and the custom became entrenched across the continent. Pre-colonial means of discipline should be remembered and applied, she said. We need to get back to traditional practices, as both Asada and Terrace are sharing with us, practices of how children were raised, teaching values through storytelling and illustration. Carol Bauer of the Quaker Peace Center agrees. The center's Peace Hub in Cape Town's Township engages youth and parents around issues of family and community violence. From all the records that we can find, physical discipline of children was not in African culture, and that's the continent because Africa is a continent. There are several nations. Before slavery, she said, the missionaries, the colonizers, and the slave traders are what brought corporal punishment to Africa. But as Asada has already intimated or shared with us, okay, that's where we're from. She's trying to show us where we need to get to. We need to break the cycle. It's not about the tide. I believe I got this from Akitha. We need to move the tide. The tide should not be moving us. We need to become that force.
I agree.
Terrace,
100%.
I want to direct
Yes.
this to you. With your own experiences that you shared with me about how you were raised, what was the catalyst for change that made you decide to not only do things differently in rearing your own children, but to share the ways Asada expounds on in her book with other people who are often strangers to you?
Well, my situation was rather extreme. Both my parents came from they were orphans, and they came from large families of orphans. And when their parents died in Arkansas, Tucker, Arkansas, they stayed on the land and brought the crop in, but they had to take care of themselves and discipline themselves. And what they knew culturally is what they used. And so discipline was really very harsh in my family. My mother would beat us at the least in the of any um, problem. And when I talked about it once, she looked surprised. She said, "But there were so many of you. How could I control you? How could I keep you safe if I didn't beat you?" And so that's where if I'd rather kill you than myself than have someone else kill you. It was scary. It was a time of terror, and you wanted to kind of keep your kids to buckle down and not look white folks in the eye, not speak up too much, not get yourself like that nail sticking up and
Mm-hmm.
not be beat public or killed or whatever it is they did to control us. The parents became part of that control system because
Mm-hmm.
they wanted to see you live, not necessarily survive, not necessarily be happy, but the minimum that wanted was to see you live. Now, I was the oldest of 7 children, and, and I was taught and I believed it was my job to care for the younger ones, that's not a bad idea. And to this day, I love that job. But I saw it. I saw my mother just brutalizing us. Not my father. He would just do what she told him. But she was brutalizing us, and it was scary. And you never knew when she was going to hit you because she liked to sneak up on you because that was even more effective in terrorizing you so that you would obey her, at the drop of a hat. And so I saw that and I just thought, it's not right. I was scared all the time. And we were reared Catholic. And once I said, Matia, I got an idea. Why don't you only beat us for mortal sins? And she said, get out of my face. But she was overwhelmed, absolutely overwhelmed. And I realize that now. And she needed somebody, a community person, somebody to step in and say, you don't have to do it that way. Even to meet her halfway, you can hit them, but not brutalize them. And then go from there to saying, you don't have to even do that anymore. And so I was a reader. When my mother had her last child, the hospital gave her a year subscription to Parents Magazine, and she was too busy to read it. I read it. I read everything I could get my hands on. I took classes in college. I took classes after my children were born. And so I've always thought there was a better way. I just didn't know why.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know the background, the lessons I needed to learn. And it was from there. And then I'm 82 years old, and I'm still working on my relationship with my mother. I'm still trying to figure out why she did these things, how she did them. By 10 years old, she's the only girl in the family of 5, and she was an orphan. And she had to drop out of school and, as they say, keep house. There was a lot she needed to deal with. But she brought me books when I was 2 years old, So there's so many good things, and that beating just overshadows it. And I don't use the word spank because that's kind of not quite accurate. Black people don't spank. It's to what I've seen. Black people hit. Black people whoop, and whoop, it means whip. And they use things that are whip-like, extension cords and belts and things like that. So and being the oldest and caring about my brothers and sisters and trying to help my family live a better life at a young age is what got me started.
Akitha? That's very heavy.
It is. It is. I'm just going to pivot to Asada, just as we're talking about rearing from home and dealing with the stressors as a parent. In previous discussions, Asada, you said that people who feel powerless in the real world often take that out in their home by exerting power over their children using beatings, verbal abuse, and other forms of humiliation under the guise of disciplining their children. I have always thought of home as a sanctuary, a place to leave the problems of the world at the door. But I realize that some people internalize feelings of powerlessness outside of the home and may not be conscious of projecting those feelings onto their children. And it's creating an environment where they are the rulers of their homes and must be obeyed without question. Now, how do you get people to recognize their behavior and begin to evaluate and self-correct?
First, I want to point out one main concept that Terrace mentioned, which was control. Because the goal of even controlling the children is a problem. Why would you want to control them? Like, they're not wild animals that are out in the open, and you got to tame them and get them ready to be in the house. You don't have to do that. And so they are very capable of controlling themselves. All we have to do is give the guidelines. They're new to the world, they're new to the environment. So let's show by example how you do this. If you're smoking and cursing and then you tell them don't smoke and curse, problem. You ain't gonna have a good time trying to get them to do what you're not doing, right? So control, I think one of the things we need to work on is to not try to control them. Sit down before you hurt yourself. Don't hold on. You're gonna fall and hit yourself. That is your fear. Don't do that. Let them and watch. You just observe their environment, and if you see something is harmful, come close, be near. You be able to stop the negative force from affecting them, but let them have the freedom to explore and experience without having to be harmed. Now, when it comes to what you mentioned, the question of, and you might have to repeat the question because I go off on, it's so many levels. I can talk on with this, but you talked about, give me that question one more time because I've had a specific answer.
No problem. It's just how do you get people to recognize this behavior and begin to evaluate and self-correct?
Oh, yeah. So my favorite is in my workshops. I love them because I get to actually have folks get in this topic as themselves. We're not going to look at what you do. We're going to look at what was done to you. And so I have a certain exercise where the parents have to illustrate their first moment of violence. What does that look like? Illustrate it. And they're like, I gotta draw it. Yup. Going back to kindergarten. Come on. So they have to draw that. And my gosh, y'all should see some of the images. Some of it, my mother throwing a phone at my head.
Oh, wow.
Putting a baby in the microwave. I mean, it's insane. It is like insane.
Wow.
Now, what happens is, and I mean, I've seen daddy following me in the woods with a rifle, blah, blah, blah. Now, what happens is, when they revisit what was done to them, I then do part of the exercise after we've looked at all of the drawings and assessed them and looked at what happened. The question comes and I say, now what would have been a better way for you? What would have been better to do? I'm telling you, like I would say 95, maybe 98% of what everyone says is they should have just communicated with me. They should have just asked me, right? And so once we do that assessment and look at what would have been better, guess what happens? You can see the light bulbs going off in their heads. Oh my God, I'm not talking. Like they can see how what they're doing mirrors what was done to them. And I never have to say it. I never have to say, see how what you're doing is like what you did. I never have to say it. They then assess themselves. I got to go talk to my son. I have to go talk to my daughter. I have to, like, it's very clear that the behavior that they've been doing is a residual of what was done to them. And then they end it crying and everything. I see grandmas crying, all kind of stuff, like when people come to the realization. So that's where the self-correcting comes in. Don't look at what you're doing because you're on automaticity. You on automatic hitting people. You don't even have a good reasoning for it at all. But you're just doing it's almost like revenge in a way. Wait till I get older and I can
Oh,
do that.
yes. Yes.
Wait till I get old and I can control somebody type of thing. But then, when you go through something like this and you think through it, I've seen such great transformations in the type of communication that begins to happen between a mother and a child. And I tell a mother sometime, you want to get on the brothers, but if I was a brother, I might not go with no black woman because they kick my all my life. They kick my butt. So I don't even want one. That is what can be happening. Now I don't care what people do in terms of love and this and that, but when you look at the black woman and black women in your life always debase black men and beat them and blah blah blah. This is not an issue of relationships and whether men or women are wrong. You mentioned moms and moms setting the tone for discipline. Yeah, well, you're also setting the tone for how relationships emerge and whether one hates us or whether one beats us. A lot of it comes from this culture we create of violence with our children. So I go on these different tangents and this is a winding road of insanity when you're talking about how we deal with our children and how we hit our children, but it can be handled and it doesn't take long because I'm telling you, when I do those workshops and the people make a shift, it's only an hour. It's only an hour and a half that will change a lifetime. And so that's why I love you sisters for what you taking my book and giving it to people or like what but it does work because I give those books out on public transportation. If I see an issue, if I see somebody getting ready to hit a child, I just come over and say, hey ma, I said, I know it's stressful, how many you got? And then she starts to talk. I could tell she's smart because of blah. So now the conversation ensues between her and I, and now the attention is taken off of her hitting the child. And then I say, like, because see, when I validate the child and I say, ooh, they seem so smart. And then you see her slight smile. Yeah, she's smart, but sometimes she's too smart. I said, girl, she a reflection of you. And then she started laughing. And then I started laughing. And I say, hey, I wrote a book about us parents and how we can help not have to hit them. And I asked them, if I give it to you, would you read it? And they go, of course I would. And then I sign it and then I give it to them. We take a picture, a selfie, put on thing. So it turns into a different thing. And now they have a tool. And I've been actually stopped by moms in the street. Excuse me, miss, hey, you gave me that book. It worked. Blah, blah, blah. Or
That's
I
great.
came home. Yes, awesome. I came home one day and I just tell this little story. I came home one day, a guy is moving packages out of a truck. And I'm walking to the building. He said, excuse me. And I said, yeah. He said, you that lady that wrote that book, Beating Black Kids? I said, yeah. He said, you changed my way of fathering because I read that
Wow.
before my baby was born. I was like, oh God, I might as well have rolled on the ground, start rolling around like a puppy or something. But yeah, so it'll work. It doesn't take long. It just takes the courage to confront. And to confront just means to look at without wanting to run away. That's all
And
it means.
Asada, on the other hand, and when you mention control, there's another sort of control out there, and that's other Black parents. You'll have your kid and somewhere, and he runs off, and you say, "Oh, baby, come back! Don't do that. I get worried when I don't see you." And somebody will mutter under their breath, "She needs to beat his little
Oh
behind."
yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
you could be at any kind of meeting,
Mhm.
educated people, and I heard one woman say, those prisons wouldn't be so full if people were beating their little behinds, and
Oh God.
all of
Mm-mm.
these kinds of
Mm-mm.
misunderstood
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
But other parents will try to keep you in that little box where
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
everybody does this.
I consider that
Sure.
like a negative version of the takes a village. Sometimes
Yes.
people don't mind their business when they should be. And oftentimes, when
Right.
they should be offering a word of encouragement, they're nowhere to be found. I have to add, I feel like sometimes it's like Greek organizations treat hazing. It's,
Mm.
Yes.
um, in many ways, beating your child is like hazing. It's what you went through. It was humiliating, made you feel powerless and ashamed. But now you're in the position of power. It's your turn to dole out that trauma. What on earth are we thinking? What too many
Mhm.
people decide to do is pass that trauma on to the next generation. I can think of more. Well, and I'm going to not disagree, but add a layer to this. I can see how a lot of people who are raised by mothers as the primary disciplinarian might feel that way towards women, but I can't let men off and escape that. Those same men rarely look at the father's absence as a
Mhm.
cause and a factor as to why that mother was so stressed,
Mhm.
why that mother had more than she could handle, why was he not sharing
Absolutely.
that, and then they go on to sometimes repeat that behavior. So there's more than one cycle at play here, and
Hmm.
women are often the primary caregivers, but I can think of more than a few examples in pop culture. I'm older, so I'm going to use examples from things I heard growing up. I remember Richard Pryor joking about you go home and beat your kids and he's joking about people taking out their frustrations on their children. And
Mhm.
James Brown wrote Papa Don't Take No Mess. There's a line in that where he says, Papa didn't cuss. He didn't raise a whole lot of fuss, but when we did wrong, Papa beat the hell out of us. It's
Mhm.
in some
Mm-hmm.
areas of the South, the father is that's solely it. He works, he
Yes.
provides,
Yes.
he
Yes.
gives no affection. All he does is discipline and provide. And that's a problem too. We need
Like a
balance.
machine. Yeah.
Yes, we need balance. We are a creative, innovative people, and I just refuse to believe that we have to be stuck in these traditions. Um, I'll admit I've evolved on this issue over time. I used to think it was acceptable to swat the hand of a child that's too young to understand. Even saying it out loud sounds ridiculous now, especially if the child would be doing something that would be seriously harmful to themselves or others. I thought it was fine when they're young, but then when they're old enough to understand, talking to them, explaining why their behavior is out of line is the better option. But that uh, basically I thought that way. But meeting Terrace, talking with her, reading Asada's work, and her sharing Asada's work with me helped me to evolve too. I mean, I will admit I came from that school of thought, but
Mhm.
I will share with you one of the worst beatings. You talk about it in your book, Asada. So what have you been hit with, beat with? And one of
Mhm.
the worst beatings I ever had was because I was probably about 5, maybe 6. My mother said, "Do not ride your bike in the street." She was trying to protect me, granted,
Yes. Yes.
but I said, "Okay, I won't ride it in the street." And I went around the corner so she couldn't see me and
Hmm.
rode it in the street. But the neighbor lady saw me. It takes a village. She told my mother, oh my goodness, my mom beat me with a Hot Wheel track, the hard
Oh my
orange
goodness.
kind, the kind you
Oh,
used to
you
Mm.
know,
step on
I got
and
that in the book.
yes, I will never forget that. Did it stop me from riding my bike? Yes. But over 40 years later, I'm still traumatized by that. I
Hmm.
absolutely am. I realize that. That's
Hmm.
something that I don't want to say it's unhealed, but if I can still remember that clearly, that tells you what it did to my own psyche.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
um, I guess what I'm trying to say is that yes, that's where we come from. I agree with Asada, but it is not just a village; it's a two-person job. And now, I to be fair, all all parent relationships are not equal. There are grandmothers out there, grandfathers, there's single fathers. There are same gender couples raising children. We're speaking to everybody. On eTalk Radio, it's the community means everyone. So regardless of how your family unit is set up, this is for everyone. It's absolutely for everyone.
Yeah. I want people to just take responsibility and be accountable
Right.
for what kind of being are you? What is your contribution to the planet? Are you civil? Because for a woman to outlash and hit children, if I was a dude, I wouldn't want her. Same for the dude. If he's hitting women, hitting his girl, because I've stopped man on the train, little girl's about 4. He's pulling her to his side and kind of, hitting her and trying to get her in order. And she's not even hardly doing anything. But I get up, I stand next to him because I'm not here to make a spectacle in front of everyone. I stand next to him because he's sitting down. I'm in New York. And I'm able to stand next to him enough for him to hear me. And I say, you as a dad hitting her shows her that men that love her can hit her.
Yes.
And so goes women, ask them. Many women out here feel like if a man doesn't hit you, he don't love you. Why you not hit me? Like they don't even get treated right if they don't hit them. And it's just another layer of the psychosis where violence means love. Violence means protection. Violence means safety. No, it doesn't.
No, I
I have
agree.
it doesn't. And I have a whole t-shirt line called Love Don't Hurt. And love does
Right.
not hurt.
Also, one of the things that bothers me is the way whooping and beating and hitting is handled on social media. Um,
Yes. Yes.
People think it's funny.
It's
Oh, they make
embarrassing.
such jokes about it on TikTok. There's little skits, and it's always treated as something funny.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
people try to outdo each other. Oh, my
Mhm.
mama beat me with some hot water, whatever.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's just I worry about that because that's that younger generation and growing up and it's reinforced. And
Mhm.
no one seems sad about it. No one seems resentful about it, which we know is not true. And
Yeah.
No.
I'd like I'm thinking about that. I don't know exactly what my approach should be because social media in many cases is supposed to be pleasant and diverting and funny and all of that stuff, so you'd be a wet blanket, but it bothers me how it's reinforced over and
Mhm.
over and over as
Oh God.
something funny.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a fine line between laughing and crying.
That's
Very
true.
fine
That's
line.
true.
And so these people, you find people who are vehemently opposed like ourselves, and you find people that make fun of it. Well, the making fun of it is just to help handle the confusion, the hurt, and it seems like something that I don't know, like I said, we herald, that we beat up like we're proud of it. But that's why you at the bottom of the totem pole. That's why you get minimum wage. Because people can't respect people who beat their future.
Mm.
Well,
You damage your
you
future
know,
before it even gets there.
yeah, I think we have to not, you know, I don't know how to say this, but it's not, I don't necessarily believe it's why we're at minimum wage, but
Agreed.
I think it's the most important thing in our lives at this point is to value our children and to treat them as though they're valued. And before, and I see that as a separate thing from dealing with all of these other horrific things in the world. If
Oh,
we
Mhm.
can
good.
keep our
Yeah,
children
definitely.
safe, if we
I'm
can
gonna
keep our children safe,
Yes, I'm
we
gonna
can deal
add
with those
that
other
too.
things.
I agree with you, Terrace. Well, Asada, I see what you're saying, but I disagree a little bit too because I believe it's a system. We did not create that system, but I see what you're saying is that you can perpetuate certain cycles by the way you treat and react and what you are creating in your family unit and how you're raised. But minimum wage is it's purely a capitalistic thing that has been in place, and they're suppressing lots of people that don't look anything like us. That
Well,
is
let
a
me give some
system.
clarity. But I need to give clarity because I'm not saying it is the reason for minimum wage. What I'm saying is when you have low self-worth, you will allow yourself to be handled in any way people choose.
Okay.
From minimum wage to any damn thing. I mean, excuse my French. But look, our low self-worth makes it so that we are not courageous enough to say when we come out of college, oh no, 45,000. Oh no, 70,000 minimum. I start. Like, we're not going to do that. Not when you have low self-worth and you are hiding and you don't feel good about yourself and you have low self-esteem. And these are the things that I'm talking about. And so you get these other parts of the system that definitely take advantage of you because you are not strong enough to make sure it doesn't happen.
And I
So
can
it's not
validate that. I can validate that in my own personal experiences. And yes, I agree with you. And you're coming up against the system, and the system terrified me.
Mhm,
I didn't, I worked in civil service, but I didn't know my true value and my true
mhm,
worth. But let me ask you something. Have any of you had kids that were just too cute to hit? I think my kids are just too cute. But besides all of this intellectual stuff that we're talking about, my kids, I couldn't hit them because they were too cute.
mhm.
Mhm.
I'm my daughter's cheerleader.
Hmm.
And I'm her cheerleader because of the type of being that she became. She became that type of being because of the mother that raised her. And so that involved no hitting, that involved, like, even if she did something I didn't care about, like, let's say there was some low grades on a report card or something, I told her, I'm not going to hit you. You don't have to hide this from me. I'm not going to hit you or yell at you. You just making me seasick right now with all these C's or whatever. It's just,
Mhm.
and we're just gonna, yeah, we deal with whatever it is in a way where I tell her this is your life. And how you choose to do things in it is yours. You're under my roof right now because you chose me as a parent. Cool. I said, but this is what goes on in this environment in terms of good grades or whatever it is. I said, but if you don't want to do those things, let's just look at where else you can live. Let's find that. Maybe it's with your uncle. Maybe it's your father's a truck driver. Maybe it's in a truck. They got bunk beds in there. So let's just look at how you can live and where you can live. But if you plan on living here, it's just this is what needs to happen. But no suppression, no feelings of force from me or something that makes her uncomfortable. But see, that all has to do with me. The parent has to look at oneself. How do you handle adversity? Just to take it on a scientific tip for 2 seconds, the brain is a muscle. We know that. But if one is yelled at constantly or hit constantly, it generates a level of stress that is considered toxic stress. And it
Mhm.
starts to affect the part of the brain that makes decisions in times of adversity. And so, if that part of the brain is fully developed, then people can make decisions when there's something wrong and they do it right and they can handle the system and everything else. But when it is not fully developed, then guess what? We don't handle adversity well. You know how you can tell? Look at our community. Look at it. We don't handle adversity well to the point where we kill each other. Though we need help, we all have this problem of having toxic stress at a very early age. And so our brains don't get to fully develop if that's the case. My daughter, never been hit, grows up, 8 years old, tells a teacher, oh, I'm going to go to my grandma's house and I'm going to have this, I'm going to have that. And the teacher says, oh, you're spoiled. And my daughter goes, I'm highly loved, not spoiled. There's a difference.
I love
It tells
that.
her there's a difference. That is deep for an 8-year-old. So that's what I'm talking about when you have the brain capacity, where you don't have that part of the brain debilitated, then you
Mhm.
can fend for yourself. You don't
Mhm.
have to
Right.
deal with people dishing you out things that you don't want.
Mhm. Mm, mm, mm,
Okay.
mm. I
And
appreciate all of that. Go
Mhm,
ahead.
I just wanted to follow up with Asada. When we're talking about parenting and I'm a mother,
mhm,
and I always felt that I'm not the perfect mother, and I've learned from my mistakes, and I continuously try to work on improvements every day.
mhm,
But in some of your interviews, you stated that if you're unable to parent without hitting your child your children and disciplining them, then you should not have children. In your book, you do speak about how many pregnancies are unplanned with the current political climate here in America. They are trying to eliminate family planning options in so many states. What do you say to people who have children that they didn't plan on having them, but they're here now? how do we get these people who may be overburdened with childbearing and rearing due to lack of options for a variety of reasons to stop perpetuating the harmful notion that beating children is the only or best way to discipline them, that we will keep them in line, so to speak. Like, we're dealing with children raising children.
Yeah, children raising children doesn't bother me much because if we were in a different country, you'd become a woman earlier. Like, as soon as you start menstruating, you're a woman, period.
Right.
As soon as you can have a child, period. So we would treat them differently. But it's not that, this whole thing of, and your questions as I'm thinking, my mind is going, I want to make sure that I touch what you ask. But I don't feel like, first of all, I don't know one person. I might know one person that was planned. I don't hardly know anybody that was planned. I just
Right.
don't. We all here without planning, pretty much. Most of us. I know on one hand. Okay, so it's not so much that, oh, you didn't plan, you're not a good parent. That ain't true. I wasn't planned. My
No,
daughter
no,
wasn't planned.
that the question. What I'm maybe I
No. I understand the
Okay.
question. I'm just getting there.
Okay.
You
Okay.
understand the
I'm sorry.
question.
My apologies.
No problem. I'm just getting there. But
Hmm.
because I think it's important, because I do talk about Planned Parenthood in the book, not
Yes.
as an institution, but just as planning. If we did plan our children, it would lend to a more civilized, thought about experience. Like, some people, unfortunately, they do think of when they're going to beat their child when they get here. I did a workshop at Old Dominion University and was in the students' lounge, and those children were planning to beat their kids like it was no tomorrow. Kids weren't even here yet. I was like, y'all planning to beat people before they get here? I said, y'all need to just drop out of college. Just drop out. What's the point? If that's how you're going to run this, and then that it changed to whatever it needed to. But the point is this: um, hitting a child has a lot to do with one's own self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
And what you see that you create in a child, whether you planned them or not, how that child's going to further your life purpose. But if you haven't identified even the purpose of yourself, then what guidelines are you giving to your child? And that's really what it boils down to. The hitting doesn't even come up as an option if you're thinking about your purposes, because you're too busy trying to develop your purpose and the child's purpose as you go along. I'm an author, I'm a photographer, I went to school for television and film, I'm a bunch of things, I dance, blah, blah, blah. My daughter has told me, even at an early age, I'm trying to get her to read and say, oh, reading is great. It'll help you travel and live vicariously through people. And at 8 years old, she said, what you fail to realize is that I'm not you. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So what do I do? Do I smack her? You being
No.
fresh? Nope.
Right.
You being wise. You being wise. You showing me who you are before you even an adult. And so then I have to shape. Okay, I needed to read. So how do I shape it? So then it's up to me to come up with a way, which I did, where now she's reading books and looking at me like, you need to stop playing so many video games and read. Good, great, great. I'm glad she has that viewpoint. So it's about, we have to become clever at how we want to get them to places. Don't be boring. Just because you're an adult and a parent doesn't mean you have to be boring and uncool. Just communicate. My daughter told a friend, my mom's my best friend. That was a long time ago, but still, she values me as a person in her life. And so I think what we need to do, planned or not, is get a glimpse of what is my purpose. And then,
Mm-hmm.
do we want the child to take on the family name? Do we want the child to? I had to look at her innate abilities. I sent her to modeling school. I showed her how to take pictures at a young age. She has a book out. She has a website. She's now a professional photographer. All the other things that I exposed her to, whether it was the cello, violin, modeling, she didn't like those, but she likes the photography. And that's and I had to watch and then cater to the things that she likes. So that much energy we don't really give children. We make them do things. We tell them, you're not going to make money doing that. You need to be a doctor. And we use that control and force to take them in a way, maybe do things that we didn't do. But nah, let's observe, and let's Be a friend. Some people say, I'm not her friend, I'm her mother. Well, then you need to go to the dictionary and look up friend, because when you look up friend, it doesn't mean peer. Peer is when you do things that a certain generation does, and you no, but a friend is someone that you rely on, someone that, like, look up the definition, is wonderful. And I definitely am her friend. So I think if parents focused on being their children's friends in terms of understanding them, being there for them, you'd have a different picture, no matter what the background is. Married, not, single, whatever. We can do it, but we just have to be civil with each other and really care about what we're doing with each other.
Asada, I agree with you. But on the other hand, raising children by yourself as a single parent is darn hard. It's
I know,
very
I've done
hard.
it. I've done it.
Yes,
And
but
it's not hard
not
to me.
everybody has your resources, your actual internal resources, and your brilliance. I think you're actually brilliant, but not everybody has that. And I look at it. Most of the children born in my family in this generation have been to single parents, and
Hmm.
I see how hard it is. It is
Hmm.
really hard. And you get home from work and you have two of them running around, and you're trying to cook dinner. One has poured the flour and the syrup and all that. People have a lot of stresses that they have to learn to deal with
They
and
do.
not to recognize that it's really, really hard.
Yeah,
And
see, I
I
go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the hard part is a consideration. My brilliance doesn't come from a silver spoon or anything. It comes from a mother who was a good mom. I
Hmm.
think my mom might have smacked me a couple of times, this and that, but I'm gonna tell you
Hmm.
what she didn't do. My mother never drank, she never smoked, and she never got high. I, as a woman and as a young person, I never drank, I never smoked, I never got high. And so we never had things involved in our lives that altered our states of thinking or
Hmm.
altered our
Hmm.
states of being. And
Hmm.
so what did we do? My mom was a single mom, but we danced in the mirror with her. We read songs from you remember when they used to have the words on the sheet inside the albums? We used to read those
Mm-hmm.
songs, and my mom played games with her, Monopoly, Shoots and Ladders, Candyland. We played everything, and then we had video games. So my life was I play video games all day long now. So I'm just saying we just had a life that wasn't hard by
And
choice.
maybe that's what young people need to know, need to hear that. You don't always have to be on the job, the disciplinarian. You can have fun with your children. Maybe the next door lady needs to come over and help her sometime. I don't
Right.
know. But I
Right.
know it's hard and they need help beyond what they're getting from my books and my little book signings and what they're getting from your magnificent workshops. They need, I don't know, some kind of community support, some grandmother's organization, whatever, but it's really hard and they
Okay.
Well,
need some
Okay.
help.
Well, let me interject here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'll do you one better. If we're gonna toss terms and cliche phrases out like it takes a village, then we need to be the village. We need to. When I shared that story about
Absolutely.
shared the story about the neighbor lady telling my mother, she knew because she was watching. She lived next door to us. How did
Hmm.
she see me around? I was around the corner. I don't know how she saw me, but she made a
mm,
point to share it with my mother, not because she wanted to see me get beat, because she didn't want me to hurt myself. She didn't know my mom told me that. She just saw a child. I have in my own personal life been that person. If I see kids that I do not know, perfect strangers to me, doing something dangerous that could harm them, I will pull my car over in a minute and tell them to please stop that. Please be careful. Think about what you're doing. I'll do it in stores. People sometimes look at me like I'm crazy, but if I stop your child from doing something that you didn't notice they were about to do that could harm them, I just ignore it when parents take offense, because I don't say it in a mean way. I don't say it in a confrontational way. I tried to remember your words about how to approach people, Terrace. That
Right.
really has Asada, that has an effect on me. Asada, you don't intimidate on people's space and look down to them. Terrace has told me how she gently approaches people, because in that moment she's creating community. She's
mm,
saying, I may never see you again, but let me impart this little bit of wisdom to you. And that's what this
sure.
show is about. Mother Wit is about sharing listen, we all need mothering. We never stop needing mothering. Terrace, your mother has long been gone, but you're still reconciling yourself
Yes, I
to
am.
that relationship.
Mhm.
That relating that we do with our parents and caregivers in our community does not stop. It should continue to evolve. And Asada, what you're sharing is saying that, okay, maybe you don't have money, you can't afford the flute lesson, the ballet lesson, but if your kids have board games, do you spend time with them? You're
That's
absolutely
it.
right. You're
And
right.
that's
You're
it's just
talking
time.
about spending, investing. You're saying investing time in that child. Children don't forget. They may listen. I think it was James Baldwin, rest his soul, that said they don't remember all the words we say, but they will absolutely remember and imitate what we do.
Absolutely,
I
absolutely. And
agree.
being engaged with our children
Mhm.
and having fun with our children. Again, let me read the definition of friend. It says a person attached to another by feelings of affection or personal regard.
Mhm.
Number two, a person who gives assistance. Number three, a person who is on good terms with another, a person who is not hostile. Man, look at those
Mm-hmm.
definitions of
Mm-hmm.
friend.
Mm-hmm.
We are so busy talking about how we're not our children's friend. We're
Mm-hmm.
not looking at why we should be their friends. And if we're
Mm-hmm.
going to definitely have the village raise the children, we doggone need to work on the village because my
Mm-hmm.
thing is, I'm not worried about the young people that have children. I'm
Mm-hmm.
worried about the old people who give them their traditions and try to tell them how to do things because it was done their way instead of looking at they want to be more civil. Like they don't have the same external forces that we had and generations before us had, so that they have to take the babies in the shed and cut their throat. They
Mm-hmm.
actually have babies who can swipe the page, swipe, do like it's a different functionality even that the children have, and they don't really have to have the same frustration, but they are products of the same frustration. And that's what we have to like really catch before it starts to fester, is to get to them and just show them how to do it this way versus all of the adults and most of these young people's lives are telling them to be harmful, to
Mm-hmm.
be violent, to be, but it's not necessarily where their head is because they do have other things that this child can be exposed to, just a different time. But as a village, we need to clean up a tad so that we are looking out for each other, but self-worth is at the basis of it. And
Mm-hmm.
we don't want them to do what we think they should do. Sometimes and many times they know what to do. I can say that as having been a high school teacher. Those young people are adults. They're just treated like children, but they think in a way that could free them. But we do a lot of taking that freedom away because it's not the way we know. Like that's like watching the little girls trying to figure out the rotary phone, and she's going, "That's what's wrong with you kids today. You don't know how to work things. You don't know how to work a rotary phone." I want to say, "Girl, you don't know how to work a smartphone. The child don't need to know how to work a rotary phone right now. We are going forward." So I'm just saying, we need to give them credit, increase our own self-worth, and make it so that they can act from where they are. God is sending them here with what they need, but we can't make it wrong the way they do things or make it wrong to have the things that they need in this time. So yeah, we I want us to operate more as a community, as a village, and I just want us to clean up our dirty laundry and get that self-esteem up.
I have one more
I
point that
agree.
I definitely thank you. I definitely agree with what you're saying. I don't want to miss this point. This is something that I wanted to bring up to you, to both of you. I think back to my own mother, and sometimes my sister, or I didn't have children at the time, and they would say, oh, they're so hyper, or you all need to go sit down somewhere. When children are just being normally what children do, my mom would say they are normally active for their age. And I oftentimes think that adults project their energy level and focus onto children who are at a very different stage in their lives, which brings me to a question of methods that don't involve hitting a child as punishment, but may or may not still be harmful. I think about my nephew. He had helping to raise his wife's son from a previous relationship and his own child. When they were being what some would say is overly energetic or getting into things that they shouldn't be. Instead of calling them hyperactive, he would have the boys, as he would call it punishment, he'd have them do exercises, not strenuous, nothing that that overkill, didn't have them sweating in the hot noonday sun, but just kind of work off that excess energy. And I know that in a lot of cultures, and especially in a lot of these schools, and let's face it, a lot of Black children that are in public and private schools are not taught by Black people. And
Right.
there are cultural differences. I'm not saying they're physical differences, but I'm saying there are manifestations that come from culture. And I know that some people in some cultures are quick to want to medicate our children.
Yes.
Let's give them something for that attention deficit disorder, when what they're really trying to do is make those children into uniform little units that listen and obey without questioning. That's my own feelings on it. And I
Oh,
just want
sure.
to know, there's a lot of labels: oppositional defiant disorder. I'm not saying that there aren't some children who are truly disturbed and may benefit from medication. I know mental illness in children and adults is a real thing. Please, listeners, don't think that I'm saying that. I understand that. But some children are labeled very quickly and very early on, and they're just put into this category that sets them on a trajectory. And I have to wonder, is it the child or is it the adult that have a problem, the adults around that child? I think of these triplets that are now all going to, I want to say they're going to med school, and forgive me, but I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but they were put in special ed, all three of them. What are the odds that three children, I'm not saying that children that are in special ed aren't capable of achieving things. Please don't think I'm saying that either. I absolutely know that. But I do believe that the system, the public education, even private education, I think there's implicit bias. And I'm just wondering, Asada in particular, what do you think about alternative methods like what my nephew did? It isn't, he didn't hit them, didn't lay a hand on them. He just got them to run out that energy, redirect it, so to speak. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts, both of you, Terrace and Asada and Akitha, on what you think on alternative methods. And I don't want to say it's just boys, because girls can be this way too. But I do
Mm-hmm.
know a lot of people who have been raising boys uh, as the primary parent. And then when that boy hits puberty or 14 or so, he's out of hand and they send him to live with the father because he just won't listen. You know, suddenly he's mannish and he's still a child, but his body is becoming, is growing into manhood, and sometimes that testosterone kicks in. And just like with girls, it's not just girls. People think girls are hard to rear because they don't listen. Listen, I've seen mothers who have sons that will not listen. Just at some point, everything she says, he wants to defy. So she's like, "Okay, you want to do that? You're going to live with your dad." So I think I'm wondering if we're going to talk about village on Mother Wit on eTalk Radio. We're not here to just sew things up in a neat little bow. We're here to hash it out, talk out solutions. Ladies, share with me, what are some alternatives that don't involve hitting? Because talking may be effective, and in some situations you might need to add something else. What are your thoughts?
Um, I want to say this is Sada. I think talking is always appropriate. And Terrace is not here, just so you know. I'm looking at the
I
board.
see that. I see that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Um, Talking is always the way. Period. If you can't talk, you need to sign it. Use sign language. I don't care what you're doing. The point is to be able to have an intention, the other person have attention, and make sure that they can duplicate what you're saying. Sometimes children aren't duplicating what you're saying. And I've found that when children are running around and acting up and da 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 da, or whatever they want to do, it's usually a reflection of how they handle something that the parent is creating or the adults around them are creating. This is how they're manifesting their dislike for it or
Mm-hmm.
the lack of attention or whatever it is. First of all, children running around, the fact that we look at that as adults as a problem says a lot about our lazy selves. Get up, run, do something. It's like what you see in them running around, it should be a plus. If they weren't running around and exploring, you might wonder what's wrong. But that running around has a lot to do with a lot. Like even at 2 years old, 2 years old. people say they call it terrible twos because the young person is running around and going in things, and they don't understand it. That's actually brain activity. The synapses of the brain multiply at an incredible rate at 2 years old in a human being. And what goes with that increase in production of synapses is activity. When they turn 3, the synapses of the brain start to prune off and become less. And so the young person starts to chill out. And so all of that, you want to control them and stop, and this, even at 2, you affecting brain activity. Chill out. Stop. Let them be free. Let them run. The fact that they have the energy to run. I need to exercise more right now as a person. What if I was young, and my mom was great, so she didn't stop this, but I'm saying, what if we continue to foster growth in that area of activity? Give them more things to do. Give them more ways to be fast. Give them more ways to climb. Give them more things to dig through. Take them to the Museum of Science and Industry. Like, do the things that keep that up, not medicate them. The only reason they're being medicated is because the adults in the area don't want to pick it up. You don't want to keep in tune and in motion with that active being. Being active is a plus. It keeps circulation going. It keeps blood flowing. It keeps the mind moving. Like, to want to stifle that is the backwards thinking. And so that's where we need to like get a grip on what's the real picture here? What's the actual picture? Is this child hyperactive and out of control, or are we just unwilling to meet them where they are? And I say the latter. As adults, we want to drug them up so they're easier to control, and then we don't have to do as much. Nope, not for it. I'm for all of the freedom that we can allow them. And that's something that we as a people, Black people, are not comfortable with, is freedom. Freedom scares us. We
It's
don't know what
true.
to do with it. We don't know
Well,
what to do with that. So we need to handle that and allow them to not be free. Forget that. Nobody grants it to you. You just are it. And so when we see them being free, how can you maintain that freedom for them so that they can grow?
I agree, and I understand that point. I just when we deal with active children, and talking to them is always the point that I will run home. But you have to learn, as Asada and Terrace has brought up, you have to learn who your child is. You have individuals in each person. If someone's not a morning person and you have a very active child, you try to adjust your schedule. It doesn't make sense to fight against the tide, just roll with it.
Hmm.
I have 3 children, 3 different personalities, and all were active at one point at 2 and 3 years old. No, I didn't believe in leashes. I didn't believe in carrying them all over the place at 3 and 4 years old to keep them from running around. It was just certain times that our schedule went. If I wanted to go to the mall, I did it before nap time, right before lunch. If I wanted to go out and have dinner with them and to teach them how to order food and make sure they were able to talk about it, I thought about the busy days in the restaurant, how their schedule was, who felt like going, who took naps at 12, and who didn't like going anywhere after 3 o'clock. There's just some adjustments as a parent you will have to make. You don't
Hmm.
dictate their moves. You
Hmm.
work with them and you understand them. And believe me, fighting against the tide is a lot harder and tiring than allowing it to flow and just move with it. And will they act out sometimes? I act out and I'm over 40. And you know what happens? I put myself in either timeout, or you think about like, okay, why am I acting like this? And you try to instill that in your kids. Like, if I'm so upset with mommy and I don't want to be in the grocery store, why am I on this floor? You let them have that tantrum. You look at them and say, are you done? And then you're like, oh my God, I guess so. Well, let's
Hmm.
go. And we're going to talk about it when we get home. You acting out and they acting out is only making everyone tired and upset in that process and around that process.
Exactly. And that's why earlier you made some mention about how I said, if these things bother you, shouldn't have children. The context is this. If what you just said, if you don't have a willingness to adjust to the people that came through your body and make sure that everybody's on the same page and that you connect to each different personality and all the things that come with parenting, then yes, you need to think about not having children because it comes with all of these beautiful things that
Mm-hmm.
you have to do, and you learn from each of them in different ways. And so, it's not a blanket, if you ain't gonna do this, you shouldn't have no children. Look, I just said we're not playing. So, and probably we wouldn't be populated as wonderfully as we are if we did plan. So
Mm-hmm.
good. So we're here to procure the human race and to keep it going and to develop it and to be happy in it. We just have to focus on that part. But some people know I'm not having children. Maybe that's the best decision because they know if they did, this would happen. And that's all I'm saying is that, hey, this territory of parenthood, guess what? It doesn't come with a manual. It does come with beating black kids though, but I'm just saying it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't come with an instruction guide for each child. So you have to be willing to experience whatever they're bringing to the table. And I do find that kids that do have problems, there's something in that family, something's going on. And that's the part that gets hidden really well because the parents don't advertise it and they go, "Oh, I don't he was raised in such a way." You don't know. Talk to the child. Don't talk to the adult. Talk to the child about what they experience and you'll find what it is. It could be that they don't like you having a new boyfriend and they like their daddy more. Or it could be that they don't like that you smoke so much and they don't like smoking. It could be anything, but if you don't ask them, you won't know. And that's the sort of, I like to keep that playing field with my daughter. How does this make you feel? If I want to do something, I ask her, how does this make you feel? She says, well, I ain't got no choice. No, you do have a choice. Talk to me. What is it? And I just want to hear her viewpoint so I can respect it. And the problem becomes we don't really respect what young people think or say. Do as I say, not as I do, blah, blah, blah. A child should be seen and not heard. Like those are the things that we have as stable datums for how children should be treated. And it's not necessarily the case. It's not the case. We need to respect where they are, what their ideas are, even when they're little, and go ahead and grow what the family unit is going to be based on that.
Okay, ladies, we're going to take a quick break here because we've lost Terrace and I'm trying to get her back on the phone. So stay with us. I'm going to pause the recording, see if I can get her on via phone. They lost power for some reason where she is.
So,
And let me see if I can get her back on. She says she has one final point she wants to add. Hold on
Okay.
just a moment. And we're back and we have Terrace with us again. We had a little technical difficulty. Terrace, you wanted to add a point about um, the things I was asking about attention deficit disorder, children with different labels and how we treat them. Go ahead.
We were talking about kids in school, hyperactivity, etc. I saw a very interesting little thing on TikTok last night. It was a white woman, and she said, white women are to schools like police are to communities. And it kind of made sense in a way, in that
mm-hmm.
it's a cultural thing. It's a cultural, it's different. And yes, the schools are primarily the there's more white women than anyone else in the schools, and then and we have children who are exuberant and active and smart, and sometimes just overly whatever those positive things are, and I think they're misunderstood uh, very often. And it's seen as a discipline problem or as a medical problem. We require medication to calm them down and keep them in their seats and their eyes focused on the teacher and their hands, crossed. And that's another problem that I think that we as people, and I see myself as the grandmother, has to address. I don't really know how to address it except for on a one-to-one issue. I had a nephew that I reared who was supposedly ADD, and we were able to work through that. I've known people who were ADD, and they were able to focus that energy, focus that exuberance. My son was diagnosed as high energy, And the doctor told us that's a good thing because he can focus on anything. He can accomplish anything he wants because of that energy when he channels it. And so he sat in his bedroom online and got a master's in some esoteric computer stuff, but he focused that energy. And so I think we need to work on that. You know, as I was waiting to fix my technical difficulty, I thought about a Bill Withers song, Grandma's Hands. And I think we need an organization in every community. This is where the village really comes into impact of grandmothers to lay on hands. And by lay on hands, I don't mean religious in a sense, but to work with young families, young mothers, and help them understand the values that we've talked about today. Give them some support. I really do think families need a lot more support than they get these days.
I absolutely agree.
I agree.
Help them navigate systems. Many of us I know are former, civil servants, and we know how to navigate systems. Help them do things like that. Make sure they have enough food. Make sure they have babysitters. Make sure they know that there's somebody they can call on and can help them.
You're talking about rebuilding community and rebuilding the village paradigm that I grew up with the village paradigm. I will be honest with you, maybe not the African version, but I don't use the term African American, but in this context, I will, the African American version of the village. And it wasn't just in neighbor ladies tattletaling on me, but in other ways too. I felt safe growing up. My sister and brother were very young when they would sometimes ride public transportation. I rode public transportation by myself growing up in Ohio at a very young age. I don't think I would do that with a child today. So the world has, in some areas, many areas, become a less safe place. There's less community, and we definitely have let the village way of creating community that supports all people, all members of the village. We have let that fall by the wayside. And I can't blame anything or point any one thing out, but I think you are all right. Asada mentioned, try to match that energy. I wish our school systems would evolve because they're still teaching from a system of beliefs and a method that's way out of date. These children today.
It's Victorian, raising people to make widgets.
Yeah.
That's what our school system really does.
Yeah, I agree. Ladies, this has been a really, really interesting, productive conversation. I'm so grateful to you for taking time out today to be with us. Do any of you have any closing thoughts you want to contribute to or share with the audience? And I just want to say to the audience, listen, we don't have all the answers. That's not what we're here for. We want to hear from you. We want our listeners to comment. We want our listeners to become engaged in the process. What Terrace has proposed, if you have the time, if you have the wherewithal to do it, start something. Start from where you are and create that village where you are. It doesn't have to be a 501c3 national organization. It can be something small within your community. It's important for us all to communicate. Each one, reach one and teach one. And to your absolute ability, that is what you can contribute, what you have at your disposal. We will be sharing with listeners copies of Beating Black Kids by Asada, and we will be giving away copies of Terrace's latest book, which is now in paperback, which is Smelling Herself. So I just wanted to give a shout out to both of them. We will have links in the comments section as to how you can order the book, but we will be giving out copies of the book to a few lucky listeners of each of their works. And I just want to ask each of you, starting with Asada, do you have anything that you want to add? And then we'll go to Terrace, and Akitha, you can close it.
Sure. I like just keeping it in line with this it takes a village. And my thing is, we've been given an opportunity as of late to create a new normal. And the village that we may be used to may not be the village we should be trying to maintain to create this next surge of descendants coming up and coming through us. And I feel like the village needs to take a moment's pause to heal. And when I say that, it doesn't mean through supplements and this and that. And it just means to deal with self. What is your personal contribution to the planet? And what is your child's contribution to the planet? And observe what those things are and be civil to each other and be nice to each other and be nice to yourself and care for yourself. And one of the biggest things I say is really focus on admiration. Admire who you are and really look and find what you admire in your child. Not the love. Y'all confuse love with silly things like I buy these clothes because I love you. No. Mm-mm. What do you admire about the child, and then validate them for it so that they grow up in the world really contributing that thing and feeling well supported by us so that this future of ours can be something that we really created and started anew, started fresh without all of the old habits that have been debilitating us. So I guess that's how I'll close it for today.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Terrace.
Oh, certainly. I just want to thank the two of you for what you've done, putting on this, developing this radio station and this show. I think it's remarkable, and I think it's something that we need. I want to call on the grandmothers out there. I think we are the power, and we have the ability, one by one, to make a change. And that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on the grandmother's hands, laying on those hands.
Nice.
I love that. Thank you. And Miss Akitha, what do you have to add?
I just want to thank both of you for creating a platform through your books and giving us an option as Black parents to know that change has to happen, and it can. I mean, you misstep on Monday, you work better to do it Tuesday. As Maya
Right.
Angelou famously said, when you know better, we do better.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that this is a conversation that has to be had, and different doesn't always mean better, but we as parents of the generation that's coming up have to move forward and stop looking back.
Mm-hmm.
I agree 100%. Thank you so much for listening today. Thank you for participating, each and every one of you. And as I said to the audience earlier, we will have links where you can reach Asada if you are interested in her workshops or to obtain a copy of her book. And the same with Terrace, where she would make the book, where the book would be available to you, and we will be giving away several copies. But when that runs out, please make an effort if you're able to obtain that the copy. I recommend each book. Asada's book is not a thick book. It's a manual type. Well, I'd say it's a pamphlet type book. It's let's see, about 98 pages. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very easy read. And Terrace's book is riveting. It's entertaining. Don't let the parts of it that may be a little bit traumatic get to you, because the narrative quality makes it all worth it. She's such a wonderful writer. So thank you again, all of you ladies, for being with us today. And join us again on Mother Wit with E Talk Radio. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.